It is Sunday evening, August 29th, 2021, and that is the impact in Gulf Shores from Hurricane Ida, a Category 4 storm making landfall in Louisiana, distant from the NBC15 area, but the impacts for many of us are actually just beginning. Do not let your guard down. Don't assume the worst is over, because things are going to pick up across our area tonight and on Monday. 80 degrees, the winds 14 miles an hour. That's at Jack Edwards Airport off of the beaches. Earlier today along the coastline, there were wind gusts as high as 65 miles per hour. As of late afternoon, it's very clear where the eye of the storm is to the west of New Orleans. Red boxes, tornado warnings along the Pearl River. We've had multiple warnings for either tornadoes or flash flooding. And notice those bands of rain, they are going to come back into our area and be off and on all the way through Monday. So as of late afternoon, not too bad. We do have some boxes showing up in Baldwin County. Now those are flash flood warnings, both along Escambia County, Florida, and along the Fort Morgan Peninsula. The threat of flooding, now that many of us have already picked up 2 to 3 inches, that threat goes up quickly because it only takes another couple of inches to fall fast to make flooding. The overall threats for the NBC15 area: flash flooding, storm surge. Even though it may have been moderate to high for some of you, it's actually going to be higher later tonight. I'll show you why. High wind still along the coast, steady winds 30 to 40 miles an hour, gusting higher, and then isolated tornado threats. No real way to know in advance where they may be, but we take them literally hour by hour, watching those rain bands moving into the area. From cloudy skies. So with the rain falling, rivers, they're going to rise. River flood warnings for the Leaf River, Chickasawhay, rivers like the Tom Bigby, also Bayou Sarah, and also along the Perdido River. Those spots, be ready. And even if you're not technically under a river flood warning, you know when the rain falls, the rivers rise. We do have a flash flood watch for our entire area, well back to the west, well to the northwest for most of Mississippi. And the storm surge warning for Mobile Bay, Mobile, Baldwin Counties, 3 to 5 feet of storm surge. Remember, that runs on top of the regular tide, and that's why it's a big deal, because at this point I'm recording late in the day, we are at low tide. High tide comes overnight. In the Panhandle, lesser amounts of storm surge. High tide Monday morning around 5 a.m. The natural tide cycle will go about 1.5 feet higher for high tide than it is at low tide. So Monday morning, the threat of storm surge goes up. Monday evening, it goes down. Tuesday morning, it actually goes up again as we still deal with lingering impact from Hurricane Ida. Tropical storm warnings continue. Baldwin County, Washington County, Mobile County, all counties to the west. That simply says tropical storm force winds are still likely in these areas. Ida is not done with us. A tornado watch, don't worry about the expiration, because there will be more watches to replace these, and we go into Monday with that same risk of isolated tornadoes. Stay updated. Now here's a projection overnight, and what it shows is a heavier band of rain coming in before the sun comes up, and close to sunrise it shows more solid areas of rain coming into the area. So even though Ida will be losing some wind speed and passing basically north and then northeast of us, as it does so, it will drag in a lot of moisture. And look at the wind direction by sunrise. It's almost a due south wind. That wind at high tide will push water into Mobile Bay, up against the causeway. The water will splash over and the eastbound lanes will be closed. So that happens consistently with the steady south wind. I'll show you the wind projections in a moment. By about early afternoon, notice the heaviest rain bands going even farther eastward. What looks to be a break to the west, but don't count on that break, because what it means is we may not have as much widespread rain, but there will still be some bands of rain behind Ida as it goes into Tennessee. And in those bands, there will still be a threat of isolated tornadoes. By Monday evening late, the overall rain coverage goes down, but the concern is that those bands will linger into Tuesday. They can stretch hundreds of miles away from the center of a tropical storm or hurricane. So wind projection 10 o'clock, 10:30 this evening. Look at the scale in the upper left where you see red. That is tropical storm force wind, 40 miles an hour or greater. Yellow is 30 to 40 miles an hour, and this projection is for the steady wind. Notice at that point, places north of I-10, 15 miles an hour, no more than 25 miles an hour. Along the coast, you'll still see that 25 to 35 to nearly 40 mile an hour steady wind, and that can gust 50, 55, 60, and even inland with steady wind at 15 to 25, it'll gust 35 to 40 to 45 easily, and that's without rain. Towards sunrise, there's that south wind again. Steady winds about the same near the coast. You see the bright red offshore. That's the tropical storm force wind. But now, instead of looking at the exact numbers, just look at the colors. You see green and a lot more yellow and red across Mississippi. The steadier winds increase in the morning. So this again is why you should not be thinking Ida made landfall, everything's okay. As it goes northward, these bands get closer to us, the heavier rain and the higher wind. So early in the morning to the afternoon, look at the winds projected here. Greene County, George County, Mobile County, steady winds around 25 miles an hour, gusting 35 to 40. Notice the yellow appearing in Mobile Bay. That's wind of 30 to 40. And through the afternoon, you see a lot of red and yellow along the coast into the bays. So by tomorrow afternoon, remember high tide is before sunrise. Even as the tide cycle goes down, if this wind stays up, the tide levels, the surge may stay up also. So expect storm surge to go up tonight, maybe go down a little tomorrow, but it may not. It may stay up all the way through the day tomorrow, depending upon what bay and what river you live in. And remember, rivers that drain to Mobile Bay, like Fish River, for example, water will get pushed up into the river, and you'll deal with storm surge in that regard. So that's the evening, Monday evening, strong wind. Latest information on Ida as of 6 o'clock, Sunday evening, the 29th of August. West of New Orleans, winds of 125 miles an hour, just very gradually losing wind speed. You look at that broad area of cloudiness, and most of this is actually cirrus clouds. Now, there are thunderstorm clouds beneath it, but the size of it sometimes makes you think that the whole thing is the storm. But the core of the storm is actually small in a sense, and I'll show you why that is. There are a couple of other systems you need to be aware of. Tropical Depression number 10, just so you don't get them mixed up. Tropical Depression number 10, it's in the central Atlantic, and it's moving northward at 12 miles an hour. What that means is it is no threat to any land in the next 5 days. That will likely become a tropical storm, and the next name on the list would be Kate. In the north central Atlantic, there is Tropical Storm Julian, and that one is moving northeastward rapidly at 24 miles an hour. And that system looks like that should also stay in the open water. So two other systems in the Atlantic right now. And then if you look even farther to the east, coming off the coast of Africa, a really strong tropical wave that may become another system. So we could see a whole bunch of things happening in the next couple of days. Fortunately, nothing else imminent in the Gulf of Mexico, but still a bunch of things out there. All right, here's some really interesting stats. Ida, we know, 16 years after Katrina. Location, basically the same if you're looking at the big picture, but look at the big difference in the landfall maximum wind. Now, Ida's maximum wind, that is estimated. You rarely can measure directly the actual wind, but you can use radar, you can use the low pressure and the readings around it to interpolate what that highest wind should be, and the data from the hurricane hunters. So 150 mile an hour winds at landfall, that may be adjusted later. Compare it to Katrina at 125. And then of course Ivan, Sally, they were weaker storms in terms of wind. Those of you who are impacted by Sally, even though the winds were a lot lower than these other storms, the motion was basically 5 times slower than all these other storms. So if you got under the eye wall or a feeder band, you were under that impact 5 times longer than in what you would expect in a typical storm. That's why Sally was so devastating. Now, Katrina and Ivan, look at the radius of the hurricane force winds. In other words, from the center, how far out? Are the winds 75 miles an hour or greater? Katrina was tremendously large. Ivan was large. Sally, average, I guess. And look at Ida, not much different from Sally. So when you look at stats, you can't just compare the wind. You have to compare the forward motion and the radius, and that's what makes a big difference in what a storm does. You'll recall from Ivan and Katrina, you might recall that when they were in the southern Gulf, the central Gulf, they both were Category 5s, big Category 5 storms. They generated tremendous storm surge, and both of them weakened toward landfall. In fact, Katrina's winds at one point were 160 miles an hour. Ida, on the other hand, up until yesterday, 24 hours before landfall, it was a Category 2. And then overnight, it rapidly intensified. So there's hope in the distance. We get through a Monday that's still a very unsettled day. Threats of tropical storm force wind in the NBC15 area, threats of storm surge, threats of tornadoes, threats of flash flooding. Don't underestimate it. You still need to stay updated. Tuesday will be a transition day to a calmer middle of the week. And once we're past Wednesday, look at Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Not unusual after a hurricane or tropical storm goes through to get a lot of dry air coming in behind it. And that's what we see here. Rain chances go down. Humidity goes down a little bit. We might have a few nights in the upper 60s going into the weekend. We've just got to get through what we are dealing with now. And what we are dealing with is Hurricane Ida. Stay safe, stay updated, use your NBC15 weather app to click on the county or parish you live in. It will outline all the watches, advisories, and warnings, and all the details on what you might experience. I'm NBC15 Chief Meteorologist Alan Seals.